Order. Questions to the Prime Minister. Martin Vickers.
Number one, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sure the whole House will wish to join me in celebrating Armed Forces Week. Our armed forces are the best in the world, and this week is an important opportunity to pause and reflect on their dedication and their sacrifice in keeping the country safe. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, and in addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Martin Vickers.
I too welcome the Prime Minister's comments about Armed Forces Weekend, and there is a major event in my constituency to mark the occasion. Mr. Speaker, I thank the my right honourable friend for agreeing to meet with me and the honourable lady from Great Grimsby following the announcement yesterday of significant job losses by Young Seafoods in the area. Indeed, they are the largest employer. It's particularly disappointing after a run of good news. Much investment has been attracted with the help of the Regional Growth Fund. Could my right honourable friend assure me that perhaps additional help and support may be given to the area through the RGF, and it's important to retain Young's presence in the area?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to meet with my honourable friend, and as he says, the recent reports surrounding Young's are concerning, and I know this will be a difficult time for employees and their families. The company will be talking to employees, and the government stands ready to assist in any way that it can. He's right, the broader picture is more positive. We've got the Able UK Marine Energy Park creating up to 4,000 jobs, and also, of course, the Siemens investment nearby, which is a major investment for the region. We'll continue to provide support for the Regional Growth Fund. 49 awards have been made in Yorkshire and the Humber area. We'll keep up with that, and we'll keep up with the long-term economic plan for growth and jobs we need.
I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to our armed services, including the reserves. We honour those who are serving today, and we remember the sacrifice of those who've served in the past. And let's never forget them when we think of the freedom and democracy that we have today. And I'd also like to pay tribute to the Families Federations, the Army Families Federation, the Navy Families Federation and the Air Force Families Federation. The great work they do supporting service families contributes so much to the strength of our services. Mr. Speaker, we've all seen the chaotic scenes at Calais, where British travellers and lorry drivers are facing harassment and intimidation as 3,000 migrants try to get illegally into the UK. The French should be assessing them as soon as they get to Calais to decide whether they're genuine refugees or whether they're migrant workers who should be removed. How confident is the Prime Minister that the French are going to start taking effective action? What's he doing to put pressure on them? And will he be raising it at the EU Council this weekend?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, can I thank the right honourable lady for what she says about Forces families? She's absolutely right. And this Saturday, when many of us will be attending Armed Forces Days celebrations and commemorations, it's a moment to talk to those families and thank them for what they do when they're missing their loved ones. She quite rightly asked about Calais. It is totally unacceptable scenes that we've all been witnessing for the last day. Of course, there was a key role played in this by the strike that took place in France. She asked specifically about what should be done, and let me answer very clearly. Of course, we want to see migrants better documented and fingerprinted, but frankly, a lot of that needs to happen in Italy, where they land, rather than in France. The three things we must act on is, first of all, better security at Calais, working with the French. We've already invested £12 million. I'm happy for us to do more if that is necessary. We've got to work with European partners to stop this problem at source, to break the link between getting in a boat and getting settlement in Europe. And thirdly, we've got to do more to make sure that Britain is a less easy place for illegal migrants to come to and work in, and that's what our immigration bill is all about.
Harriet Harman.
He's right that this problem is the responsibility of the Italian authorities and the French authorities, but as he acknowledged, is also an issue about the security of our border at Calais. Can he say a bit more about what steps he's taken to strengthen security at the UK border in Calais?
Prime Minister.
Well, the Honourable Lady is absolutely right. The juxtaposed border controls on the French side are a good thing for our country, and we should be prepared to invest in them. That's what the £12 million has been about. But in talks with the Home Secretary this morning, we've been looking at whether we can put more personnel and indeed sniffer dog teams on that side of the channel to make a difference. And there's also more work being done in terms of installing fencing, not just around the port at Calais, but also around the Eurostar and Eurotunnel entrance. All these things can make a difference, and we should work with the French very closely. There's no point either side trying to point the finger of blame at each other. This is a strong partnership that we have in place, and we should keep it that way.
Harriet Harman.
I thank the Prime Minister for that answer, and really efforts on all sides will need to be stepped up. Turning to another issue, the Prime Minister said in his speech on Monday, there's nothing progressive about robbing from our children. But isn't it inevitable that cuts in tax credits for working families, unless employers raise their wages immediately, mean children will be worse off?
Well, first of all, what I said in my speech about robbing from our children was the importance of getting our deficit down and not asking them to pay debts that we weren't prepared to deal with ourselves. Now, what we need to do is make sure we go on with a plan that's seeing 2.2 million more people in work. And crucially for children, compared with when I became Prime Minister, there are 390,000 fewer children in households where no one works. My programme for tackling poverty is to get more people in work, get them better paid, and cut their taxes.
Harriet Harman.
Well, I'm asking about robbing from children who are in families who are facing tax credit cuts. The IFS have said that cutting £5 billion from tax credits would mean working families losing, on average, £1,400 a year. Now, I know he doesn't have to budget, but many families do. Well, it's the truth. It's the truth. No, it's the truth. It's the truth. Think about, if honourable members would just for a moment think about a lone parent working part-time. To compensate her for that loss of £1,400 a year, the minimum wage would have to go up overnight by 25%. That's not going to happen, is it?
Prime Minister.
The problem with what the Honourable Lady says is the last government didn't budget for the country. That is when she asked...
Order. I'm very worried about the health of the honourable member. For Hornsey and Wood Green, she must calm herself at a very early stage in the proceedings. A period of calm must descend upon the House. The Prime Minister.
Because the last government didn't budget for the country, as a result, the whole country was plunged into poverty, which is what we've been dealing with. Now, let me explain what we're going to do. For those who are out of work, we want to get them a job and a well-paid job. That's the best route out of poverty. For those in work, we want to see higher rates of pay, lower taxes. Our programme is simple. Let's have an economy with higher pay, lower taxes and lower welfare. What she seems to want is the current failure of low pay, high taxes and high welfare. That's what we need to move on from.
But you see, Mr. Speaker, you don't get higher pay by cutting tax credits. He seems to be saying that low-income families won't lose out because somehow on the day that he cuts tax credits, every employer in the country will rush to immediately put up pay. To compensate for the loss of tax credits, that would mean employers putting up pay overnight by twice what the OBR has said they're going to do over a full year. That's not going to happen, is it?
We are seeing rates of pay in our economy go up because we've got a strong and successful economy because of the decisions that we took. But what the Honourable Lady doesn't seem to understand is if you don't get people back to work and reduce welfare, you're going to have to make deep cuts in the NHS, which we don't want to see, or you're going to have to put up taxes, which we don't want to see. Now look, if the Labour Party wants to spend this 5 years arguing against any change in the welfare system, I say let them. You'll end up with the same result.
What he doesn't seem to understand is that these are people who are in work, who are going out to work, providing for themselves and their children. The truth is, the Prime Minister is going to cut tax credits. He's not going to make up for that loss by putting up the minimum wage overnight. Employers are not going to make up for that loss either. So millions of families with children are going to be worse off. He says he's tackling low pay. He's not. He's attacking the low paid. So much for the party of working people.
The party of working people is the party that's got 2 million more people into work. That's got almost 400,000 children in households where people are working. That is why you can see a party that believes in work against a party which, according to one of the leadership contenders, is now the anti-worker party. That is what the Honourable Member for Pontefract and Castleford said. But I would say to the Honourable Lady, in the week when Greece teeters on the brink, we should learn the lessons of what happens when debts spiral and you lose control of your economy. Labour is stuck with the same answer: more borrowing, more welfare, more debt. It's the same old Labour, and it'll lead to the same old failure.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Would the Prime Minister agree that one of the best ways of tackling the cycle of child poverty is, in fact, to ensure that we deal with persistent educational underachievement, to ensure that children get the best start in life, particularly in schools, universities, and just as importantly in vocational education?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. If we really want to tackle the deep and entrenched poverty we have in our country, we need to go after the causes of poverty. The causes of poverty are sinked schools, high unemployment, debt, addiction and family breakdown. Those are the things that can make a difference. I was at a school this week on the outskirts of Runcorn with 65% free school meals, and yet that school was able to achieve almost 2/3 5 good A to C's at GCSE. Now that's a better record, frankly, than many schools in leafy, well-off constituencies, so it can be done. So let's go after the causes of poverty, and then we can really lift people out of that entrenched poverty.
Angus Robertson!
No, just put down.
Mr. Speaker, we join the tributes to the armed forces, to all those people who have been organising and will be attending Armed Force Day events across the UK. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister and other UK party leaders made a promise. They made a vow that more powers will be delivered to the Scottish Parliament. The people were promised home rule. They were promised, and I quote, as close to federalism as possible. Why does the Prime Minister's Scotland Bill not even deliver the limited Smith Commission proposals?
First of all, the bill that we've put in front of this House does deliver the Smith Commission. It fulfils the vow that all of us kept. But of course, what it doesn't fulfil is the full fiscal autonomy that his party would like, that would land Scottish taxpayers with a bill of thousands and thousands of pounds. If that's his policy, when he gets up, he should say so.
Mr. Angus Robertson!
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The House of Commons Library says that important parts of the Smith Commission proposals are not in the Scotland Bill that the Prime Minister has proposed. The shortcomings in the bill have been identified by an all-party committee in the Scottish Parliament on which the Scottish Conservative Party sits. Are all of these people wrong? Will the Prime Minister now commit to deliver the Smith Commission proposals in full and all of the powers that were voted for by the people of Scotland in the general election?
We addressed precisely the points made by the committee in the Scottish Parliament that he refers to. But, Mr. Speaker, this goes to a larger truth. which is the Scottish National Party, only want to talk about process. They don't actually dare talk about which powers that they're being given they'd like to use. If you don't like the way things are fixed, why don't you put up taxes and spend more money? Isn't it time you started talking about the policies you want to put in place, the outcomes? Because the truth is this: full fiscal autonomy has now become FFS, full fiscal shambles.
Andrea Jenkins.
Would the Prime Minister investigate why some Labour-controlled councils, including Leeds, are ramping up their charges to schools wishing to become academies? A good example of this is Woodkirk Academy in Morley and Outward.
Well, I'm delighted that Woodkirk Academy and its feeder primary schools have applied to set up a multi-academy trust. It often really works if you have secondary schools working with primary schools to improve the results in those primary schools. I am also convinced, when you look at the figures, that converter academies are performing better than the local authority main schools. That's why the change is so necessary. So I would say to the Labour Party, don't stand in the way of this change. Help bring these academies about.
Jonathan Edwards.
Sunday Times reported over the weekend that the Department for Transport is planning to scale back an AXE rail electrification project. Can the Prime Minister inform the House and the people of Wales whether it continues to be the policy of his government to complete the electrification of the Great Western Line to Swansea by 2018 and part-fund the Valley lines?
Great question, Prime Minister.
I can tell him we're absolutely committed to electrifying the Great Western Main Line to Cardiff through to Swansea. We're also contributing £125 million to the cost of the wider Valley Lines electrification. It's vital that this work goes ahead. We do need to make sure that Network Rail gets its costs under control and has strong leadership in place, and we'll make sure those things happen.
In Holland Rake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unemployment is down 61% in Thirsk and Walton since 2010. A strong endorsement of this government's policy to make work pay, and also to the hard work and investment of business people in my constituency. What further support will the Prime Minister offer to help with much needed investment in the A64, superfast broadband and mobile phone coverage, all of which would further help job creation in my area?
First of all, let me welcome my honourable friend to this place and the work I know he'll do on behalf of his constituents. And he's absolutely right. In rural areas like the one that he represents, better transport, better broadband and filling in the not spots on the mobile phone network are absolutely vital. The mobile infrastructure project is providing more homes and businesses with mobile coverage, but we do need to make sure we build the masts that go ahead. I'm pleased to say that the A64 is part of our £3 billion investment in roads in the North East and Yorkshire. And as for broadband, I think we've got 130,000 homes and businesses getting access in North Yorkshire, but there's more to be done.
Theresa Pearce.
Damage in the womb by sodium valproate, a drug prescribed for epilepsy. Although GPs are now more aware of the risks, the National Archives show the risks were well known by drug companies and government as far back as 1973, yet mothers were kept in the dark. Will the Prime Minister urge his Health Secretary to meet with me and the delegation of mothers who are affected by this issue to discuss their case?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, can I thank the Honourable Lady for raising this case. I'm not aware of the specific drug that she mentions, but I'll look at it very closely as someone who had a son who had very severe epilepsy and know how little we really know about many of these drugs. I'll certainly fix the meeting between her and the Health Secretary so they can make progress on this issue.
Mr. William Ragg.
Does my right honourable friend agree that a northern powerhouse requires proper transport infrastructure? Can the Prime Minister update me on my campaign to get the A6 Hazel Grove bypass to reduce congestion and increase growth in my constituency?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, which is why we're increasing transport levels in the northwest. We're investing £4.3 billion on the strategic road network. The A6 to Manchester Airport Relief Road, as he knows, is going ahead. And I'm pleased to confirm that we provided Greater Manchester Combined Authority with £350,000 to fund a feasibility study for the next stage of the bypass route around Stockport and Hazel Grove that my honourable friend refers to. I do understand that if this could go ahead, it would really make a lot of difference in terms of relieving congestion.
Mr. Ben Bradshaw.
With the death of yet another cyclist, again a young woman commuter beneath the wheels of a tipper truck, will the Prime Minister meet with a small delegation from the all-party parliamentary cycling group to discuss what more can be done to protect vulnerable road users, including the call by the acting leader of the Labour Party for a ban on these killer lorries in our towns and cities at peak times?
I'm very happy to have that meeting. It does seem to me that although a lot has been done in London to try to make cycling safer and cycling safer on our roads with the cycling strategy, money is being invested, cycle lanes are being introduced, the number of fatalities is still very high and extremely depressing, young lives being snuffed out in this way. So I'm very happy to have that meeting and perhaps also keep in contact with the Mayor about this important issue.
Rishi Sunak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the Prime Minister mentioned, access to high-quality broadband is essential in today's digital economy. Can my right honourable friend tell us about his plans to get broadband to my rural constituents and those in rural areas across the country?
Well, first of all, let me welcome my honourable friend to this place. He's got the job of following in the footsteps of William Hague, which a number of us have found very difficult in all sorts of different ways, but I'm sure he'll do it very well. Look, the figures on superfast coverage are encouraging. We went from 45% in 2010 to over 80%, but obviously there's a real challenge getting to the remaining bits of the country, including the most rural areas, so that we have got this £8 million investment fund and we're piloting a number of solutions. One of these is run by Airwave and is testing new technology in the Upper Dales communities near my honourable friend's constituency. So he's on the cutting edge of this digital technology, and if it works, we can obviously boost it faster.
Tasmina Ahmed Sheikh.
Last week, this government sent out a message to the world that Scotland was closed for business when it comes to future investment in the renewable energy sector. Today, the core report on exports estimates that this government is set to miss its own target for exports by up to £300 billion. Could the Prime Minister confirm when he's going to stand up for the best interests of the Scottish economy?
Well, first of all, if Scotland wasn't part of the United Kingdom, there wouldn't be this access to the UK energy market, but I suppose we can leave that on one side. What I'd say to the Honourable Lady is, first of all, we've got a huge increase in renewable energy right across the United Kingdom in recent years. What we've done is remove some of the subsidy from onshore wind, because we're going to reach 10% of our electricity generation from onshore wind, and so now it's right that it should be for local communities to make that decision. Interestingly, a position that before they got into government, the SNP agreed with.
Percy.
Very grateful, Mr. Speaker. Last year, the £75 million mis-selling of cashback warranties by Scottish Power, including to thousands of my constituents, was raised with the Prime Minister. A year later, very little has happened, with Scottish Power dodging their responsibilities to 625,000 people across the United Kingdom. In light of the most recent evidence, can my right honourable friend urge ministers and himself, ministers in the Department of Business, Innovation and Skills, to look again at this issue, to get people back the money that they're owed?
No, my honourable friend is absolutely right to raise this issue. And I understand that it's the liquidation of the companies involved in the scheme that's still underway. And so as a result, the creditors of those companies have not yet received the reports from the liquidators to see if this money can be extracted. So I will, before the party opposite get too excited, most of this happened between 1997 and 2001. But I will... I've asked the Business Secretary to meet with my honourable friend to discuss his concerns directly.
Alison McGovern.
Go on, Ali. Mr. Speaker, the great Englishman John Donne said, "No man is an island entire of itself. Each is a part of the continent, a piece of the main." With reference to vulnerable child refugees, does the Prime Minister agree?
Yes, I do, and that's why Britain fulfills its obligations in terms of taking asylum seekers from all over the world and having a system that many other countries see is robust and fair. It's also why we're playing our role in the Mediterranean, first with HMS Bulwark, now with HMS Enterprise, rescuing people who are desperately in need. It's also why, uniquely amongst the large rich countries, we've kept our promise about funding overseas aid and are investing in those North African countries from which these people are coming. I'm quite convinced we're doing what we should to fulfil our moral obligations as a nation.
Mr. Crispin Blunt.
At the last comprehensive spending review, the clever wheeze of transferring expenditure on the BBC World Service to the BBC from the Foreign Office budget helped prevent a calamity to our foreign policy capacity. 5 years on, foreign policy making and analysis has got considerably more challenging. Will he ensure that a siloed savings requirement is not applied to our capacity to direct the overseas element of our national security strategy or our ability to represent the country abroad?
Well, first of all, can I congratulate my honourable friend on his election as the chairman of this vitally important committee in this House. I know he will always speak out without fear or favour, and he's vigorously independent. He's right to say that the soft power we have as a country, whether through the British Council, the BBC, the Foreign Office, our overseas aid budget that I was just talking about, all those things are vitally important, not just to fulfil our moral obligations, but also to project power and influence and British values in the world. And I want to make sure those things continue. He talked about the BBC funding being a wheeze. I'm not sure I'd call it that. I think it was part of the BBC making sure that it found efficiencies, as other parts of the public sector were too.
Jack Dromey.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we heard that early referral for cancer tests could save 10,000 lives a year. Siobhan Galbraith, a 21-year-old Erdington mother of a 3-year-old son, suffered in agony for 6 months. 3 times she was refused referral. She was told she was too young. Now she is battling cancer, cervical cancer, and will never have another child. Will the Prime Minister ask the Secretary of State to investigate what happened and meet with me? And will the Prime Minister act to ensure that in future we have early referral so that never again do we get people denied treatment which can be the difference between life and death?
Prime Minister.
Well, first of all, I quite understand why he raises this individual case, and I'm sure that my right honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will look specifically at that case. He's absolutely right that early referral is the key to improving cancer outcomes. And while I'm not standing at this dispatch box and saying that the problem has been solved, I would say that we are now making sure that something like 650,000 more patients are actually being referred in terms of cancer. And crucially, those sort of diagnostic tests that can often find out whether you have the colon cancer or the bowel cancer, we're seeing many, many more of those tests, something like 400,000 more of those tests being carried out. But I think the key here is to make sure that GPs get the training and the information necessary to early identify the cancers so they can rapidly onward refer.
Lynn Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister made 2 promises especially important to the people of Mid Wales before the general election. He's fulfilled one of them by scrapping onshore wind farm subsidies. And when he fulfills the other by visiting the Royal Welsh Show in 3 weeks' time, perhaps he will call in on Montgomeryshire to see the wonderful landscapes that will now not be desecrated.
Well, let me say to my honourable friend, it was a privilege to keep the first promise to the people of Mid Wales in terms of wind farms, and it will be a pleasure to keep the second promise of coming with him to the Royal Welsh Show.
Ruth Cadbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This morning's Radio 4 Today programme was partly recorded at Brompton Bicycles in my constituency. The issue that Brompton and other employers of good quality staff producing good quality goods for export, this is an award-winning company. Their concern is that the apprenticeship scheme in this country is not fit for purpose for their needs.
Cheap and cheap.
What plans does the Prime Minister have to meet with these employers and to develop an effective, quality apprenticeship scheme rather than the cheap and cheerful scheme that is currently in place.
First of all, can I welcome the honourable lady to this House? I too have visited Brompton Bicycles. It's an absolutely excellent firm. I seem to think, I think I recorded a party political broadcast while I was there. So they're obviously an equal political opportunities employer, which is very good. I think it's very important that we make sure we have really good apprenticeship schemes. We must focus on the quality as well as the quantity, and we are committed to working with employers and making sure those employers work with local colleges to make sure the standards of these qualifications are very good.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, my constituents in South Suffolk were very pleased to hear the news that as part of the measures the Prime Minister is taking to boost mobile coverage in rural areas, that 3 of our very worst not spots had been selected for consideration for new mobile masts in Boxford, Bilderston and Attington Green. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that better mobile coverage has an important role to play in improving rural economic growth, and will he continue to do all he can to ensure that we spread the benefit of this technology as far and wide as possible?
First of all, a warm welcome to my honourable friend on winning his constituency and coming to this place. He's absolutely right. If we want to have this productivity revolution that the Chancellor and others have spoken about, we've got to improve broadband coverage in our country. The mobile infrastructure project can make a difference. 3 potential sites in South Suffolk. The honourable member should calm down a little bit. I know because there's identified 3 potential sites in South Suffolk that will make a difference. And I think what is important for all members of this House to recognise, while there are often very strong campaigns against masts, we need to see these masts built if we're going to crack this problem of not spots.
Marie Rimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has repeatedly been reported as saying he wants to create, quote, a new era of transparency in government. Given his desire, why is the Secretary of State, DWP, refusing to release the statistics relating to the deaths of people who have been declared fit for work, as instructed to do so by the Information Commissioner? Intervene and get the DWP Secretary to comply with the spirit of your desire and the request, the instruction of the Information Commissioner.
Minister. First of all, let me reassure the honourable lady this data will be published and is being prepared for publication as we speak. I think it is important that we publish data, and this government has published more data about public spending than any previous government.
Churchill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last few years, we've seen some horrendous examples of children being sexually exploited. As a mother, I would ask my right honourable friend, what's he going to do to tackle the exploitation of children?
Well, first of all, let me welcome my honourable friend. She's absolutely right to raise this. I mean, what we saw happen in Rotherham, in Rochdale and in my own city of Oxford was absolutely horrific. I think steps are being taken by police and social services to deal with this much better in future. There have been some very important prosecutions, for instance, in Oxfordshire recently. But I'm not satisfied with the progress, so I've asked the Education Secretary to chair a new child protection task force to drive fundamental reforms to improve the protection of vulnerable children. I want us to bring the vigour and the emphasis on quality that we've done in education to the area of social work.
This month's IMF report shows how unequal the UK has become, with 15% of all income in the UK going to just 1% of the top earners, whilst over 5 million people are earning less than the living wage. Given their evidence showing that increasing the income of the poorest 20% will lead to an increase in growth, why is the Prime Minister contemplating a cut in tax credits to people on low pay?
Well, first of all, what I say to the honourable lady is the statistics show that inequality in Britain has gone down and not up. And one of the reasons for that is we've got 2.2 million more people into work. But as I was saying to her right honourable friend, the leader of the opposition, What we want to see in Britain is an economy where we create well-paid jobs, we cut taxes, and we keep welfare down. The alternative, which is a low-pay, high-tax, high-welfare economy, that's what we've had under Labour, and it hasn't ended extreme poverty.
Antoinette Sandbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every week, 15 babies die or are stillborn, which is devastating for the families who suffer this loss. In half of cases, no cause of death is established. Will my right honourable friend facilitate a meeting between the Secretary of State for Health and charities the Lullaby Trust and SANS so that we can try and reduce these figures?
Well, first of all, can I welcome my honourable friend to this place? She served in the Welsh Assembly, and I know that she will serve her constituents and this place with great dedication and ability. And she proves that by raising such a difficult and heartbreaking case, because the death of every child is a tragedy, and no words can do justice to the loss felt by parents in these cases. We have made some steps forward with more midwives and, crucially, more health visitors that can make a lot of difference in the run-up to those vital days before birth. But I can tell her that NHS England is going to fund a project to develop a national child death review information system to try and drive more information. The Health Secretary is going to be keeping everyone informed on this, and I'm sure that he'll want to discuss this issue with her, given her knowledge of this area.
Mr. Gordon Marsden.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell us why he's promised local people the final say on onshore wind farms, but is denying local people in Blackpool and Lancashire the final say over local fracking applications? Why his double standards between renewable energy and fracking?
Prime Minister. I think the honourable gentleman is making a slightly odd comparison. What we've done is taken away the unnecessary subsidy for onshore wind, given it is now a mature technology, and we have a sensible planning system so that unconventional gas can go ahead under very strict environmental conditions. But I tell you what I want for Blackpool. I want Blackpool to be the centre of expertise and excellence for this industry. I want the jobs, the apprenticeships, the training, rather than to see things stuck as he wants to in Blackpool.